Doping, a word that's destroyed careers, ruined reputations, and cost millions. Today, we're looking back at 10 doping scandals that shook the world of football. Some are well known, others much less, but they all tell the same story. At this level, the slightest mistake is unforgiving. Before his turbulent spell at Manchester United, Andre Onana had already lived through another event that marked his career. In February 2021, the Cameroonian Ajax goalkeeper learned he was suspended for 12 months from all football-related activities. Reason? A positive test for furosemide, a banned diuretic often used to mask other substances. Except in his case, it wasn't doping at all. It was a tragic mistake. That morning, feeling unwell, Onana grabbed a pill from his wife's medicine cabinet. He thought he was taking a simple aspirin. In reality, it was a medication prescribed to his partner that contained the prohibited substance. The test confirmed the presence of the product, and UEFA applied the strict rule: strict liability. No matter the intention, the player is responsible for what he ingests. Ajax immediately appealed, proving the player's good faith. The Court of Arbitration for Sport acknowledged there was zero intent to cheat, but only reduced the punishment from 12 to 9 months. Onana was 24 at the time, considered one of the 10 best goalkeepers in the world. His suspension cost him an entire season, a major transfer, and several million euros. Despite the shock, Ajax publicly supported him. He returned to competition in November 2021 before signing for Inter Milan, then Manchester United. His story became a textbook case of unintentional doping, a domestic mistake turned into an administrative nightmare. October 2004, Chelsea discovers that its Romanian striker Adrian Mutu has just tested positive for cocaine. It's a complete shock. Mutu, 25 years old, is one of Europe's biggest rising stars at the time. Signed a year earlier for £22.5 million at the very beginning of the Abramovich era. The club doesn't even try to negotiate. Contract terminated on the spot. FIFA steps in, a 7-month suspension for using a banned substance. But the real punishment comes afterwards. Chelsea launches a historic legal action to recover the transfer fee they had paid. After 5 years of legal battles, the Court of Arbitration for Sport orders Mutu to pay £17 million to the English club. An astronomical sum, unprecedented in football. Mutu becomes the most indebted player in football history. At 25, he has just lost everything. And yet, he rises again. After his suspension, he signs for Juventus, then Fiorentina, where he finds his level once more and becomes one of the top scorers in Serie A. But his reputation will never recover. For many, Mutu remains the symbol of wasted talent, a player who had everything to mark his era. August 2023. After an ordinary match between Juventus and Udinese, an anti-doping test changes everything. Paul Pogba tests positive for testosterone. A few days later, the news spreads worldwide. One of the most famous French footballers, a 2018 World Cup champion, finds himself provisionally suspended. The analysis reveals the presence of DHEA, a banned substance that naturally boosts testosterone levels. Pogba swears he never intended to cheat. He explains that he took a dietary supplement recommended by a doctor in the United States without knowing it contained a prohibited substance. But anti-doping regulations are clear: strict liability, even in case of an honest mistake. In February 2024, the verdict falls. The Italian anti-doping tribunal hands him a 4-year suspension, a brutal sanction, potentially the end of his career. In France, it's a media earthquake. Everyone talks about it. It's the most high-profile doping case in recent years. Pogba appeals, and in October 2024, CAS reduces the ban to 18 months, recognizing there was no intent to dope. At 31, Pogba can finally restart his career, and in June 2025, he signs for AS Monaco. Diego Maradona, the greatest player of his generation, a symbol, a living god in Naples and in Argentina. But he was also a man whose career was eaten away by excesses and repeated suspensions. It all begins in 1991. Maradona is playing for Napoli at the peak of his fame. But after a Serie A match, he tests positive for cocaine. Italy suspends him for 15 months. A brutal fall for a man who had just made an entire city dream. This first sanction marks the start of a long downward spiral. Maradona leaves Europe, runs from the spotlight, and tries to come back again and again without ever truly finding his level again. 3 years later, in 1994, the world thinks it's witnessing his rebirth. He returns with Argentina for the World Cup in the United States. And in the very first match, he scores an incredible goal against Greece. His scream into the camera becomes legendary, but 2 matches later, everything collapses again. Positive test for ephedrine. Maradona is kicked out of the World Cup and suspended again for 15 months. After 1994, he never truly returns to the top level. His talent remained intact, but his body and his reputation could no longer follow. Yet despite everything, Maradona remains untouchable in football's collective memory. A player who won everything, lost everything, and still marked everything. His story reminds us of a hard but simple truth. Doping isn't always about cheating. Sometimes, it reveals the fragility of a man overwhelmed by his own legend. 2003, during a Manchester United training session, Rio Ferdinand is supposed to undergo a surprise anti-doping test. He forgets. Literally, he leaves the training ground to go shopping in Manchester. A simple mistake? Not for the English FA? In December, the FA hands down a historic punishment, 8 months of suspension and a £50,000 fine. And yet, Ferdinand never tested positive for any banned substance. He even took another test 36 hours later, completely negative. But the FA wanted to set an example. Their argument was simple. If a player can skip a test without consequences, the entire system collapses. Ferdinand is suspended for the entire second half of the 2003 to 2004 season, misses Euro 2004 with England, and the end of Manchester United's campaign. His suspension shocks the entire country. His teammates even consider going on strike to protest the harshness of the decision, a first in English football history. In the end, Manchester United decides not to appeal. Ferdinand serves his ban and returns in September 2004, but this case remains one of football's biggest doping misunderstandings. We stay in England for a story that's as absurd as it is unfair. Mamadou Sakho, a key figure of the French national team, was suspended for doping even though he never took any banned substance. April 2016, Liverpool faced Manchester United in the Europa League. A few days later, UEFA informs the club, Sakho has tested positive for a fat burner containing hegelamine. The problem? Hegelamine was not on the list of banned substances at the time of the test, but as a precaution, UEFA suspends him provisionally. Sakho misses the Europa League final with Liverpool, and above all, Euro 2016 with France. Without him, Deschamps calls up Adil Rami, then Samuel Umtiti, who end up securing their place in France's defense. Sakho, meanwhile, never truly comes back. 2 years later, France becomes world champion without him. In 2020, the World Anti-Doping Agency finally admits its mistake. Sakho never violated anti-doping rules and even received an official apology. But the damage was done. That test robbed him of a home Euro and probably the rest of his story with the national team. This story involves one of the most expensive transfers in modern football. Mikhailo Mudryk, the Ukrainian winger signed by Chelsea for nearly 100 million euros in January 2023, is now suspended for doping. December 2024, a thunderbolt at Stamford Bridge. Tests reveal the presence of meldonium, a substance banned since 2016, known for boosting endurance and muscle recovery. The English FA immediately announces a provisional suspension, then launches a formal procedure for violating anti-doping regulations. Mudryk, only 23 years old, proclaims his innocence. He insists he never knowingly took a banned substance. But in doping matters, the rule is simple: strict liability. The problem is that the sanction could go up to 4 years. In other words, the premature end of a career that had barely begun. For Chelsea, it's an economic disaster. A club already under financial pressure now risks losing a fortune on a player they can't even put on the pitch. His former club, Shakhtar Donetsk, publicly defends him, stating he is 100% innocent. But for now, Mudryk can't play. Today, Mudryk remains in complete uncertainty. His career is frozen, and Chelsea is holding its breath. Let's go to France, with the story of a player who once seemed destined for a great career. Ibrahima Niane, a Senegalese striker developed at FC Metz, was considered one of Ligue 1's most promising young talents. In 2020, he started the season at an incredible pace. 6 goals in 6 matches, named Player of the Month in September, and even tipped for a first call-up with Senegal. But a few weeks later, everything collapsed. A serious knee injury, a torn ACL, season over, and then in 2024, another blow hit him. A positive test for ecstasy. The French anti-doping agency confirmed the presence of the substance. Sanction: a 2-year suspension from all professional activity at just 26 years old. Nian finds himself banned from French football. A major injury, then a 2-year suspension. Nian's career collapsed before it even truly began. And now we head to Italy. A tragic story, that of a player who went from the top of Serie A to a lifetime ban. Jonathan Bacchini, an Italian winger, wore the shirts of Juventus, Brescia, and Siena. A talented, explosive player, often described as one of Italy's big hopes at the turn of the 2000s. But in 2004, after a match with Brescia, he tested positive for cocaine. First sanction, a 9-month suspension, a harsh punishment, but not a definitive one. At the time, people still believed he could bounce back. He returned, signed for Siena, and resumed his career. But a year later, in December 2005, history repeated itself. Another positive test, again for cocaine. This time, the Italian Federation gave him no chance. In January 2006, he was banned for life from professional football. At just 30 years old, his career was over for good. Bacchini will be remembered as the first player ever banned for life from Italian football. Late 90s, Italian football is the center of the world. Superstars, money, success, but also suspicion. Before the 1998 to 1999 season, AS Roma's Czech manager Zdeněk Zeman threw a grenade into the system by declaring that several star players in Serie A were taking illicit substances. The statement caused a massive uproar, but nothing came of it. The Italian justice system opened an investigation, questioned players, doctors, and coaches, but found no conclusive proof. Between 1999 and 2002, several players tested positive for nandrolone, an anabolic steroid known for boosting muscle recovery. The players involved included Edgar Davids, Pep Guardiola, Jaap Stam, Fernando Couto, and others. All maintained their innocence, pointing to contaminated supplements. At the time, Serie A was accused of systemic doping. Several club doctors were implicated. No definitive proof was ever established, but the scandal permanently tarnished the image of Italian football. The nandrolone gate became a symbol of the medical gray zone of early 2000s football, a time when even the players themselves didn't always know what they were being given. Here are 10 doping stories from the world of football, some unfair, others completely insane. And you, tell me in the comments which one struck you the most. And don't forget to subscribe to stay updated on the next videos coming out. See you soon. Ciao.